Good evening. My name is Barry Miller. I'm President and COO of DVIRC, and I want to welcome you tonight on behalf of the sponsors and also our closely aligned consultants and our special guests and speakers. We want to welcome you tonight to this event. This is our Manufacturing Leadership Series. We've been running this for a couple of years, and I think you're going to really enjoy the speakers tonight. But I'd like to also thank all of you for the gifts that you brought in for the People's Emergency Center. I mean, these gifts that you're providing for the children, they're really going to appreciate that. The People's Emergency Center is a group that we support for the last 2 or 3 years that helps homeless mothers in Philadelphia, and we're really proud to be able to support them. I'd also like at this time to thank our sponsors. We have Citizens Bank, and for those of you who are Phillies fans, you know about Cliff Lee. So that's a good thing. Also, our sponsor is Anro Print and Digital Solutions, Fesnac and Associates, Cohen, Seglius, Palace, Greenball, and Furman, and thank you, and Creative Benefits and the U.S. Commercial Service. I want to thank all of our sponsors for their support tonight. Thank you. Also, you probably saw the displays that we had out in this area included our sponsors. It also included some of our closely aligned consultants that we work with. And as you know, there's 4,500 manufacturers in the Philadelphia region. And DVIRC staff alone cannot support that, so we work very actively with third-party players to help supplement and support our delivery to you. And hopefully you had a chance to get to meet them and see the kind of caliber of players that we work with our team. But before we get started with our main presentation of the 3 players, I'd like to introduce to you Michael Masserman. And Michael is going to be giving just a 5 or so minute chat. Michael is Director of Office of Advisory Committees of International Trade Administration from the U.S. Department of Commerce. He's going to be talking to you about a public-private organization, or group, I should say, that's going to be working together from the manufacturing and the export side from the government to try and help shape public policy on export. So would you please welcome Michael Masserman. Michael? There you are.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in Pennsylvania. Thank you, Barry, for your introduction. I'd also like to thank Mark Basla and Tony Ceballos and the DVIRC for having me here for this great event. As the director of the Office of Advisory Committees, it is great to be here in Pennsylvania, one of the cradles of American manufacturing, especially in light of President Obama's National Export Initiative, ambitious goal of doubling exports over the next 5 years to support millions of jobs. And before I get into some of the details of the advisory committees and the opportunity you all have to serve on these committees, I wanted to start with 2 words. And these are 2 words that our Assistant Secretary for Manufacturing and Services has been saying when she's crisscrossing the country these past few months. And it's 2 words that I think are going to be obvious to you all, but they still remain controversial in some quarters of this country. Manufacturing matters. Manufacturing matters because manufacturing supports nearly 12 million good, stable jobs. Manufacturing matters because manufacturing accounts for 65% of our nation's exports. Manufacturing matters because manufacturing is responsible for 70% of private sector R&D in this country. And manufacturing matters because manufacturing sustains an industrial base that can make the things we need to guarantee our nation's safety in sometimes unsafe and uncertain times. That's why the revitalization of America's manufacturing is critical both for our present and for our future. Now, while manufacturing output's grown 31% in real terms since 1997, we do live in changing times where what was does not remain the same. We're learning what those changes mean for manufacturing and how manufacturing must evolve in the context of those challenges. Answers to how to create a new manufacturing America are not going to come solely from Washington. They're going to come from all of us together. And that's why these advisory committees are so critical, because we need to be hearing from you all, the private sector, the ones who are actually creating the jobs, and that's who our policymakers need to be listening to. It's true Washington had to step in to stem the economic meltdown, but the revitalization of manufacturing depends on the same drive, the same sense of imagination, the same sense of adventure that previous generations of Americans harnessed. Manufacturing is the furnace that forges our middle class and remains a vital part of the U.S. economy. For manufacturing to remain an important driver of our economy, a critical export segment, and a source of good jobs, we need to capitalize on new consumer demands and needs. 95% of consumers live outside of our nation's borders. So growth in the world economy will be driven more and more by nations seeking to improve their standards of living, thereby generating demand for goods and services that will increase over time. A new global middle class is emerging and creating new global markets for our goods and services. By implication, U.S. companies will have greater prospects for success by seeking out export opportunities. And exports are critical right here in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was actually the 10th largest exporting country out of the states out of all 50 states in 2009. Exports of manufactured goods supported an estimated 258,000 jobs in 2009. And more than 17% of all manufacturing workers in Pennsylvania depend on exports for jobs. 17%, that's a pretty high percent. So exporting is good for American business, it's good for American workers and communities, and good for American jobs. And that's why the President announced this National Export Initiative last year in the State of the Union. Again, it's doubling exports over the next 5 years to support millions of jobs. And that's why the Obama administration is committed to working with U.S. manufacturers to help ensure that American-made goods succeed in the global markets. To meet this objective, the President laid out 5 pillars for the National Export Initiative, which we call the NEI. Number 1, it's improving advocacy and trade promotion. Number 2, it's increasing access to export financing. Number 3, it's removing barriers to trade. Number 4, it's enforcing our trade rules. And number 5, it's promoting strong, sustainable, and balanced growth. With the NEI as a backdrop, I'd like to briefly tell you a little bit about the programs we have at the Department of Commerce and the International Trade Administration and what they're doing to help expand exports and revitalize American manufacturing. Commercial service programs that help increase exports include Gold Key programs that help identify export opportunities. And we've got Tony here from the U.S. Export Assistance Center. These guys work tirelessly to help small, medium-sized companies, including manufacturers, help identify these export markets. And if you haven't met Tony, I'd really encourage you to meet him because he's fantastic. We've also got an advocacy center. What these guys do is they advocate for U.S. companies for foreign procurement contracts, and that's for small, medium, and large companies, including manufacturers. Additionally, we in ITA work to reduce or eliminate market barriers and more aggressively promote U.S. products in collaboration with our partners over at USTR. Since the NEI was announced last January, we've assisted over 5,000 U.S. companies complete new export successes. The NEI has also led to a ramped up sense of coordination. We're working closer with SBA, we're working closer with Exim Bank, Department of Agriculture, and we're also working closer with local and state organizations to help ramp up exports. A stat that we like to talk about at Commerce is this. Only 1% of American companies are exporting, 1%. And of that 1%, 58% only export to one country. And that's where we need to be working with our advisors to change that. We think that if we can target folks, specifically SMEs, and I read a statistic that SMEs generated more than 1/3 of Pennsylvania's merchandise exports in 2008. If we can reach out to some of these small businesses who are already exporting and get them to export to one more country, we'd be able to double our exports. If we can reach out to some of these SMEs who are exporting to, say, Canada and say, hey, there's a different culture, there's a similar culture in Europe. If you're already exporting to Canada, you can be exporting to Europe. If you're exporting to Mexico, you can be exporting to South America. And folks like Tony will be able to help those companies. We'd be able to succeed.